All right, I'll just reintroduce myself. So again, I'm Nicolas Espinoza. I'm a third year computer science major. And yeah, I'm a co-host for
Intrepid.
the Intrepid Podcast. Yeah.
Nicholas, good to have you here with me. I'm Owen Works. I'm also a co-host for the Intrepid. I'm a fifth year industrial engineering student with a minor entrepreneurship. And today we are joined by, you want to go by Dr. York?
You can call me whatever you want me to say.
Dr. York, yeah. Do you want to give a quick intro of who you are?
Yeah, I'm Jonathan York, and for the next 7 weeks, 8 weeks at least, I'm a professor of entrepreneurship at Cal Poly, and have been doing that and involved with Cal Poly for 15 years in the area of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and that's how we met, actually. I was in one of your classes, Disruptive Technologies. It was a really good class, honestly. All the entrepreneurship minor classes have been some of my favorites. I'm glad I picked up the minor.
That's a great endorsement. Thank you. We'll take it.
Yeah, so you started the CIE, right? Here at Cal Poly. So
I did, along with one other colleague, yeah.
so how did that come about? Could you kind of explain?
Well, it was a little while ago. It was probably about 15 years ago. The College of Business at that time realized that almost everybody in the country was starting to teach entrepreneurship, and there just wasn't anything going on.
So was there anything at the time? Like, what was there before?
Well, there was no professor in entrepreneurship. So there were courses in entrepreneurship, but there were no professors. So they were taught by different people. And there was an entrepreneurship and small business management concentration that maybe had 20, 25 students and all that. So the College of Business made a commitment to change that. And a good friend of mine had semi-retired here on the Central Coast, but was also working at Cal Poly. And so he started and recruited me and said, "Hey, you want to come out here and do something different?" And so the original thing was to come and build all the curriculum and find a way to get students involved. And, it's pretty easy. Not easy in the sense of the university. That was hard. But the student thing was very easy because, the Cal Poly students aren't anything different from anywhere else. You're going to have 10% of them who are really, really entrepreneurial in their thinking. And, 10% of 20,000 students is 2,000 students. So let's find them. And that led to founding the CIE and to building the entrepreneurship minor and the hatchery and the innovation sandbox and all the things that people did to sort of make Cal Poly entrepreneur friendly.
Right. Amazing. That makes sense. What about CPE? When did they come about, or were they there?
CPE came about actually in my first year here, which I think was 13 years ago. I never know. But, my first year, a group of students came up to me and said, "Why isn't there an entrepreneurship organization club?" And honestly, I didn't even know what a club was because I had just come here. When I had gone to school, they didn't have these kind of clubs. And, and I said, "I don't know, do one." And so they did it, and they started CPE. They found out that there had been one before, and that club had folded, but somehow it left $1,500 in the bank. So it's like, okay, we'll get that money, and that'll be a start. And the students kind of took it over, and started building it, and just like, you guys are doing. From year to year, one of the things about student organizations is they turn over their leadership every year. So the first few years were chaotic. Starting new programs, and then it got organized, and then it got disorganized again, and it got more organized. And now I see really great momentum in CPE to keep the entrepreneurial sort of fires burning at Cal Poly because we need it.
Yeah, they have a great exec board, and a lot of people come out to the meetings, cool speakers as well.
It's one of the bigger clubs on campus,
yeah,
actually.
the goal was always, I never even really wanted them to call it a club. I wanted them to call it a community because a club to me implies that you're either in or out. I'm in the club or I'm not in the club. Whereas for CPE, you're in, you're out, you're doing something, you're not doing something. That's you fit it in and you don't have to pay dues. You never have to make a decision about that. So while it's officially a Cal Poly club, it doesn't operate in that same way, which I think is a virtue.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's where it's cool that you have a space like the hatchery here too, where if you're not in the minor and you're not in the club either, but you're still working on a business and you want resources and to get more of like the community aspect, you can come into the hatchery, which I think is super cool as well.
I think if you're in the hatchery and you're not in the minor or the club, you're making a big mistake.
That's fair.
I agree.
Because I think that the coursework in entrepreneurship actually teaches you something. I mean, it's not, you're going to be a better entrepreneur if you've had those courses. And I can tell you, I'm an entrepreneur, have been one, and I wish I'd had those courses. And I constantly have people coming around, alumni, successful, saying, I wish they had this when I was there. And by this, they meant this, the hatchery, this, the club, this, the courses, and all of that. So, I mean, to me, I don't mean I mean it like you shouldn't be doing it, but it's just too good to ignore, in a sense, having all that.
Speaking of that, I mean, you are an entrepreneur. I was looking at your LinkedIn. You have more CEO titles than I can count. Can you tell us about how that started and way back until college, and then how you kind of branched out in your career after that?
Sure. When I went to college, I went to be a lawyer.
And you're at Cal Poly, correct?
No, I
Okay.
did my undergraduate work at Yale University, and I did my PhD at Michigan State University. So, but anyway, I veered off course because I got really interested in, at that point, organizations and how they worked and what made them work and all that. So I knew that I didn't, and I got a PhD in psychology, so I knew I didn't want to practice psychology. So I said, well, how can I really, take advantage of this? And that was to help run systems of psychology, mental health systems, substance abuse systems, and all that. So that's kind of where I got my start. And I learned a lot from that. That's tough work. I mean, it was tough.
Yeah, I could imagine. Wait, so to be clear, you started in law undergrad, or you want to do
No,
law?
I said I was going to be a lawyer, and that was what I thought I went to school for, and I thought that was my. Then I ended up just veering off into, yeah, and I guess even getting the psychology PhD sort of was like the business side of it interested me the most, the business side of it, and so I did that. Then did something else and did some other jobs and was never started a company until it was probably about the first way back. You probably weren't even born when the internet sort of started and became that. But anyway, I looked at that and I said, okay, this, here you are, you're in your 40s. This internet thing is it's going to change everything. And most people at that point were not sure of that because like anything else. And I said, unfortunately I missed when they invented the wheel, so I couldn't capitalize on that. And I missed, electricity. And I thought I'm not going to miss the internet. So I went and started a company which morphed into other kinds of things. But ever since then, I've been more involved in sort of the startup world and all of that.
I did have a question about so I think like an umbrella term is behavioral health, kind of what you're in. What were some of the specific challenges that you faced when you're trying to set up these systems in that space?
The specific challenges were the stigma against people. Again, yeah, I mean, which is gone. It's still there, but it's much less than it was now. I mean, now you've got athletes who are understanding mental health. I mean, it's much more in the public eye. It was very stigmatized right then. It was very underfunded. I mean, you could get surgery for any part of you, but they allow you 3 days in a hospital if you were, clinically depressed. And so it was just, you were always trying to, and it's hard to help. The helping professions are hard, and tough on people and all of that. So to me, it was, I mean, you couldn't get started in a more difficult area of business in some ways.
So is that what you got your PhD in psychology, like within the behavioral space? Okay, got it. Okay. And so you found yourself applying that for your first business, is that right?
Pretty much every business, but
Pretty much
yes.
every business. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I stayed in that field for the first business. But then when I went into other kinds of businesses, it was just more like, like anything else, if you've got every experience adds on to, the one before.
So you were at some sort of institution or somewhere where you were helping create the systems, I guess?
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, you're saying everything builds on each other, but from there you went more into the internet space, and
I took a tack into an area that would be much more called public policy and government and all of that. And I spent 6 years as the president of a chamber of commerce in Columbus, which is a pretty big city, and that was in a lot of the state government and all that. So that was kind of a non-helping professions, but still out there in the world kind of job. So.
how did that help you for later on when you were starting your own businesses?
It helped me because, for one, I built my network,
Yeah.
and so I knew
huge.
people. I knew a lot of people. It helped me because I was able to, what should I say, experiment and learn about the internet while I was still on their payroll rather than mine. So I got ready to leave. And I think any job where you're dealing with lots of different constituencies is a challenging job. And by that I mean, if you go out and you get a job at a software company and you're in some area, you've got your internal company and then you got the customers, and basically nobody else is telling you anything. If you get a job where you are a president of a university or you're running a health center, you've got your clients telling you what to do, you've got the public telling you what to do, you've got the government telling you what to do, you've got students, you've got everybody, and you're balancing all of those kinds of things. And that's a different way of leading. That I think you learn. I learned in more in the nonprofit and public sector and brought it to the business sector. And I think it helped. I'm not sure.
So when you created that first business, was it just yourself, or did you have people that you brought from your previous company to the new one? How did you start?
Yeah, I had people that came with me from the previous company to the new one. But there were only, actually, there were 6 people who came, and 3 of them quit on the second day.
Wow. Why was that?
Well, because they got cold feet. And they quit their other job to come to this. And, we had our plan and all that. And we'd spent time talking about it. It wasn't just a one-day decision, hey, I'm quitting. And they quit. And then 2 days later, they came back and they said, we can't do this. We've got to go back to the other job. I said, you're making a big mistake. Because, they went back to their job. And guess what the other job told them? Get lost.
Well, yeah, you would think
Yeah.
if you quit the job, you'd see out the other one a bit longer.
I don't know. At that point in time, it was just sort of like, okay, well.
What were you guys trying to do? What was like? What were you guys all trying to do together?
It started out with just web design. I mean, it's hard to imagine, but back then to build a website, you actually had to code it. You know what I mean? It wasn't just, and then you had to figure out how you're going to get it out there and who you're going to get it to. So we were going to be a web design firm, and
Yeah, he's computer science, so he definitely knows. My senior project that I've just finished, we built a website with the optimization model in it, and because we were putting this custom model in it, like you can't use a website, but we had to actually code it, like the HTML and all the interactive stuff. So I'm like somewhat familiar. So you guys were. I guess I was gonna ask, like you said the internet. I wasn't sure if it was like internet and software, if they're like distinguishable. Like.
I mean, it's essentially when the World Wide Web came into being. I mean, the internet's been around longer, but when the World Wide Web came into being and the first browsers came out, Netscape and all that, I mean, it's ancient history here, but at that point in time was the first point in time when you could actually get information off of a network and, connect with customers and give information and just do everything. So there was a million different opportunities. Where do you want to be? What do you want to be? And so it took us a while to figure out what we wanted to be. I learned really quickly I didn't want to be a web design.
How long did you guys do that for, the web design idea? And then did you guys like pivot?
Design idea for about 6 months or so.
Okay.
And never stopped doing it until we pivoted into being a real SaaS company. and raised money and did, you know what I mean? But before that, it was kind of like, okay, well, I mean, we had a great idea, which we couldn't execute on, which was to design some method that companies that needed to be on the web but couldn't really afford to want to do it themselves could use us to get it done for them. I mean, it's not a rocket science idea. The problem is that, for us to make that work, it had to be simple and it couldn't, but for the companies, they didn't know the difference between how much IBM spent on a website, which is like $3 million, and the 10,000 they were going to give us. So they wanted a $3 million website for $10,000.
All the features and
and so it was like, we quickly said, that is not a winning business model. You've either got to be, you can't be in the middle. You've got to be high. If you're expensive, you've got to have high end customers. And if not, you've got to have customers who are willing to take. And we were caught in the middle there. So got out of that. And that led to the pivot.
into a SaaS company, software as a service.
One of our customers that when we went and decided we would build functional websites, business websites, which is at that point in time, the most important thing for a business was just getting their catalog online. Literally. I mean, they had big paper catalogs, and some of the progressive ones might send it to you on a DVD, I think. I don't even know if you could do that then. But so the idea was to help them get their one of the customers wanted us to do that. And we thought, well, we'll try to take that on. And then realized that was actually a market that made sense to be kind of a provider of web services to people who wanted to learn to sell over the web.
So I guess I just want to make sure I'm kind of understanding right. So the service you were providing, you weren't building out like websites designed by them. It's more you kind of provided this one thing where you can put their catalog online and help them sell.
Yeah.
Okay,
it helps them sell.
That totally makes sense.
And once again, that is like, if you told me to do that for you, I could find somebody to get it done by tomorrow now. But we had like 2 million lines of code, which is, it was
huge,
insane, because there was nothing that you could plug. I mean, there was nothing that you could sort of just plug in anywhere. I don't just, not even, like, so in your case, if you're going to do a website with something optimized, there's some stuff you can still plug in and play with and just let it go. But this was like everything was just like coded. We got it built into a platform as opposed to just, a one-off job kind of thing.
And I think even now that I think about it, like there's all these different code packages that we used, which, just to make it easier for the person building it, this package has these tools that would actually be a lot more code, but we get to use the package. So
imagine if everything, and you both have done work around this, imagine if every single thing you had to write.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a lot.
It's a lot.
That would be a lot.
And that was the way it kind of was. I mean, and that's not good or bad. It's just early on in the technology. And some of the people who did well are people who figured out how to containerize and do all that. But it needed, it needed a few other things at that point too. It needed much better bandwidth in terms of just the connections to the internet. And it needed eventually better PCs, just better. And so all that had to come together. And so the internet sort of took off like this. I mean, and then it went, and then that's when everybody said, oh, never gonna, we told you so. We told you so. And then it just went back.
It just kept on going up.
And now it's like, I don't know where it goes, but it's there. It's a fact of life. At this point in time, nobody's debating like they did in the early stages of whether it would actually change things or not.
And so for that newly pivoted company, how long were you there until you decided to go on to your next endeavor?
It was a 6 to 7 year run altogether. And we went into the crash of 2000 and raised money right before the crash. There was a financial crash. And the internet bubble burst, as they say. And we raised money right before there, so we at least had some money in the bank, and we're growing back up again. And then there was the 9/11, and we were in business to business, and everybody there for about 6 months, it really just dried up really hard. So the company went through some pretty tough times and laid off, like you're seeing now. laid off a bunch of people, and then eventually sold the company to a larger company. And there are a couple of our competitors who were around in that day who are still around, but most of them kind of got acquired. Or I mean, it was an interesting thing too, because we raised a lot of money, but as you can imagine, it costs a lot of money to do that kind of coding. It wasn't 4 people in a garage, and everybody was spending that money like that.
Can you explain how 9/11 impacted businesses? I'm curious about
I
that.
think it was just the economic uncertainty, and are we going to go to war, and is there going to be more attacks, and it's just oil and just all of that. It just businesses cut back their growth plans, and so they were the ones who were going to, in the next year implement a online selling solution, and they said, let's wait, or a lot, and just a lot of things, and so it just. What happens if you've got a lot of money in the bank? You try to survive. Microsoft announced 10,000 employees today being laid off. That's a profitable company. Google's laid off over 10,000. I mean, this is it's a similar time to what happened in 2000 and what happened in 2007 and 8, which didn't hit the tech companies quite as bad, but it was pretty. Yeah, more real estate and finance and all that.
Do you think we're better equipped nowadays because of technology for crashes like this, or?
That's a great question. I don't know. I think we may be worse off because we can do dumb things fast.
But what does it feel like to you, having experienced all of those previous crashes?
It doesn't feel like technology is going to help us at all with it, because it's some fundamental economic stuff that happens. It's political stuff that happens. It's world politics and all that. And, I don't see technology, first of all, I mean, technology will help us with some of our biggest problems like climate change, and technology will help us with, can help us with food and health and all that. Don't get me wrong. But when you talk technology in terms of what consumers see, directly, like Twitter or whatever, I don't see this helping us at all in terms of psychologically making it through a recession, if that's what happens, or even actually economically making it through. Maybe it will. I don't know if it'll hurt. I mean, it hurts in some people like I said, can make dumb decisions really fast with stocks and things, but that's or you can get into Sam Bankman-Fried and invest in that.
Very, very poor decisions.
A lot of poor decisions. They could you couldn't do that without the technology.
And so you just talked about like kind of companies putting money aside and doing these layoffs. So as an entrepreneur, this can be a good time though?
It can be a good time. A lot of people argue that some of the best companies come out of recessions because, first of all, some of the people who leave those jobs are going, what's it hurt me to try and start this thing now? I'm gonna reassess my. So if I were you guys, I'd be like networking like mad with that kind of, because there's gonna be great companies come out of it. They will be leaner. It happens every time, but what starts to happen is these companies get really, really over bloated, and they spend so much money, and because it's there and it's cheap, the value you get company, you're giving up 10% of your company, you're getting $50 million. It's like, and I only had to give up 10% of my company or whatever. And, the founders are sitting on a lot of ownership at that point, and they are probably not people with massive amounts of experience in downtimes. And so they tend to think it's not really a downtime. And, and then with the big companies, what happens is the way you get to be powerful in a bigger tech company is the number of people that report to you. You kind of my department's, I got 150 engineers under me, and you only got 30 under you. I'm being somewhat sarcastic, but not entirely. And so in flush times, when the money's flowing and the company's going, people are putting in recs in positions. I'm going to convince, I need 5 more engineers on this project. I'm going to write that up. And they're going, okay, go ahead. Okay, go ahead. Go. So you end up with 1,000 more employees than you need. 2,000, 3,000. Nothing wrong with the people they hired. It's just that the job should be done by the people there. And so that's these companies are now. And the unfortunate thing is a lot of people get hurt by that. A lot of people get hurt. It's a tough time.
People say that the layoffs are kind of an excuse for companies to cut lower performers. Do you think that's true?
I think no. I think it's political in most companies.
So who's to blame for that situation? I guess
Everybody.
Everybody.
I mean, I think the system just works that way. When there's a lot of capital out there, and the cost of it's really cheap, in other words, borrowing money didn't cost anything for a while there. Home mortgages were, but in terms of tech, when there's a lot of capital out there, these venture capitalists raised a lot of money. They know there are going to be some big successful companies, don't get me wrong. What starts to happen is, in the end, what will happen is the top 10 venture capital firms will have a bad year. The bottom 30% or 40% are just toast, because they can only get the crumbs in, mixing my metaphors, they can only get the crumbs anyway, or try to get in on these deals. And they're going to run out of money. Companies are going to run out of money. And you're going to see a lot of companies being absorbed into other companies for much less than they thought their valuation was the last time they raised money.
I listened to a podcast and it talks similar to that, and it was saying how the Adobe acquisition of Figma happened when it was really high, and then right after, and they're like,
but the cool thing for Adobe is, who cares? I mean, I shouldn't say, they overpaid, but the company's massively successful. They did the most incredible conversion to subscription model that nobody said they could do. I mean, I am so shocked that in this year, we are now talking about how cool Adobe is. I mean, Adobe was the least cool company on earth for a long time.
Really? I didn't know that. I feel like they've done some sort of really good rebranding.
Oh, they've done everything great.
Yeah.
But I don't say least cool. I mean, they started out, as a PostScript language.
Really?
That's what they were. Yeah. I mean, and they were always, I mean, I remember when I was doing some work in Silicon Valley, and it was time to go to meetings at Adobe, and I put on a coat and tie. And this was in the late 90s, and nobody was wearing coats and ties then. It was just, they were a straight, strict, regular old plodding along software company that just made themselves into. So anyway, I don't feel so sorry for them. It's because, I do feel sorry for guys who started a company and venture people who, were thinking they were rich. Oh my gosh, I've got, I own so many shares of my company here, and the last time it was valued at, it's a unicorn. It's $1.5 billion, and it ends up selling for like $1 million or $3 million or something. It's, there's going to be some, but it's natural.
Yeah, I don't necessarily feel bad for Adobe either. I thought it was just an example.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. It's just, Figma guys, people that whoever Figma is, they got. I hope they got out well, because it was right in time. Yeah, it was right in time.
And you said Adobe started as a scripting language?
No, I said they started as the people that did PostScript, which was the language that all printers up to then had been sort of dot matrix or heat or something, and this is the language that allowed laser printers to exist, which then brought into the world the ability for people to create their own documents, not just letters, but, with boxes and squares, and and so Adobe was the leader in that.
This is kind of an interesting question, but it's something I was thinking about there. Do you think there's a connection between maybe I guess like innovation and a recession? Like, do you think that forcing teams to get leaner and that sort of thing, do you think that like breeds more innovation, or what would that be good for? And also, do you think, I guess it's two questions. Do you see like any sort of major revolution, or like anything like the internet, like in the 2000s? Do you see something like that coming in the future?
Let me take the first one about whether sort of recession and getting leaner will help people innovate more. I think it'll focus them. I mean, you really know when you start a company that you ought to try and figure out who your key customer is early on and go for that. But when you're, got a lot of people, you may, well, let's work on this one then. Let's work on that too. And, you may not be as focused and you may not be as lean essentially. So, and there's always room for innovation. The innovations that will change us in the future are, I think clearly we don't even know what quantum computing will do when it becomes, and it will, doable and accessible, but it's going to change a lot. Obviously, nobody can stop talking about AI right now. I mean, it's like every article I get from everywhere is about how teachers use ChatGPT, how do they stop it, how you do this, how you do that. And so, I think that's the first time that this comes into the popular language and not just a bunch of, college people who know about it that's gonna continue to change the way things are. And then there's going to be some amazing medical breakthroughs too. I mean, we talked a lot about that in that disruptive technology class. We haven't solved the ethical issues around them, but they're not going away.
Yeah, so I'm very curious about that company that you said you went and you got funding for. Can you explain more about that and what that process was like?
Do you mean, I mean, we just got funding for a company I'm working with now recently.
Oh,
and
really? Wow.
It's always the same. I didn't get funding. The CEO got funding. I
Okay.
helped I sort of coached the CEO in this
Yeah.
company and that. So went through the process and it's not changed. You have to talk to a lot of people who tell you things you already know. Um, and, and
Well, I guess for the first time that you did it, can you explain, how that went?
it was horrible.
Can you elaborate like why it was
Okay.
horrible?
It was horrible because it took a lot of time when I could have been running the company. And unlike most people raising money, I probably had to do 60, 70, 80 pitches to raise the money. That's normal. What's not normal was there was no Zoom, so you had to go to every one of them
Oh,
in
yeah.
person. And what's not normal was that the companies, the venture capital companies you went to, might have had a projector, to show your slide deck, but you could never hook it up to your computer. So you had to bring your own projector, and they were like 35 pounds traveling on an airplane. So it was just you felt like just a
salesperson,
slogging
yeah,
through,
yeah.
and that's what it was. So it's a tough process. Met some interesting people. Also met some people that were not so interesting and thought they were smarter than they were, and so it's there's nothing glamorous about it, and it's nothing easy about it, no matter how much people tell you. And the only way it's easy is if you are part of a small group of inside people who have made a lot of money with each other before. And so that's how somebody can back very easily, a second time and third time entrepreneur. But as a first time entrepreneur,
And did you consider funding the company yourself? Because you said you sold the previous company, right?
these are two different companies though. So no, neither company would have been able to be funded by itself because of the business model. They were able to get started by themselves and they're able to show good unit economics in the sense of, but in terms of scale, it had to get bigger. To survive, really.
And then for the listeners, can you explain the second business and what it was about?
Well, this business I just mentioned to you right now was started by a Cal Poly alum, who industrial technology and packaging alum from the College of Business, and about 6 or 7 years ago, he got into the summer accelerator with a business that was involved. He had been flipping cars. And he figured there was a better way to do it and a better way he saw inefficiencies in the used car market. So he went and worked in a used car store for 6 months to really learn about how it works and started a company. And I was on his original advisory group because it was at the summer accelerator. And for reasons that are probably best not discussed here, he had to start the company again. Not by his fault. So in the second company, I became an investor and a board member and going on. So we are changing the way that consumers can sell their for sale by owner car. So that rather than having to use Craigslist or having to use any of those kind of things, we create an auction for them, and we get dealers to bid, and so we can bring them a better,
Dealers themselves are
yeah,
bidding.
yeah. So we find cars from consumers that consumers want to sell, and tell them, let us take it to our dealer network and bring them an offer.
Wow.
And it's really, really pretty successful in the first city, and we raise money so we can grow to other cities and do that.
Where'd that start out, or what city is it?
Started out in Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City?
It's Salt Lake City that it's in now. And the company's called Gauge. There's nothing secret about it. You can find it all online, Gauge. And the founder is Josh Hirahara.
And so this is a company you're currently investor and working with on the board. Do you have any other plans for what you're looking to do in the future here?
Any other clients?
Other clients? Yeah,
No, give me a call. I'm right here. I am really lucky to work with two other companies that are much more kind of private in that regard, but are fun, and both have young CEOs that are smart and just want to learn and want to change and are really driving for a pretty big goal. And that's great. I like that. I worked for many years with a lot of companies in the hatchery and in the incubator and all that kind of stuff. So this is kind of a natural progression.
You were talking earlier or just now about the kind of that's when you're raising money, how it's kind of intense with the sales, like, and going around and doing that. You felt like a salesman.
Nothing wrong with that, by the way.
Yeah. What are some of the more like intense moments of either when you were an entrepreneur, or maybe you've been coaching, some of the intense things you've seen happen to people you've been coaching?
The most intense moments generally revolve around either getting a commitment from an investor or a customer. And the most intense of all is when you thought you were going to get a yes and you get a no. Because you really gotta, that's just like a smack in the face. I mean, it's just, and you gotta acknowledge it's a smack in the face. You can't pretend it didn't happen, but then you just gotta get up and do the next thing. And, that's, I was thinking the other night about sort of all the young entrepreneurs I've seen over the years and worked with since I came to Cal Poly, how one factor seems to characterize those who get ahead, and that's resilience. They just seem to be, have got that to get up and just keep going and just keep trying. Because if you start a company, they're probably going to be in the first 2 years at least 50 times when you wish you didn't do it. I mean, you know what I mean? Not wish you didn't do it, but just going like, yeah,
why am I doing this?
This is like, oh God, this is too hard, And you'll probably do the typical entrepreneur game. Well, if it isn't working out in 3 months, I'll stop. And then in 3 months you go, yeah, it's doing better than I thought it might. It's not really working, but it's better. Let me give it another 3 months. And that's the kind of resilience that you really, really, really need.
Yeah, I think we were both in here earlier working with the hatchery because we're both working on our own companies. And Johnny from Ride Johnny, right? Yeah, he was saying something similar of like 1 day at a time, or I think that's what he said.
Or like one more day.
Yeah, he's like, just keep telling yourself one more day every time, long enough, and you'll make it.
The fact is that the only time a startup cannot achieve massive success is when it stops. And any other day they could achieve massive success the next day, as long as it's still around. So now. If something isn't working, stop doing that. But, stopping the company is always an option, but recognizing that you can one more day. You can one more day, whatever it takes, and just make sure that I like that. That's a good symbol to put on the wall.
Yeah.
What advice would you give aspiring entrepreneurs at Cal Poly or anywhere in today's generation?
Well, I mean, I think building your network is really, really important. I think finding people who will actually question your thinking and challenge your thinking and be willing to tell you not what to do, but when they think, you're wrong. And I've had too many young entrepreneurs who, if I give an opinion, the first thing they do is like argue with me. And it's kind of like, look, I didn't want to get in an argument. If I said to you, look, have you ever thought, I was wondering the other day about blah, 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 and you came back and said all the reasons you shouldn't do it, versus you come back and say, oh, why were you, tell me more about that? What were you thinking about that? Why did you, and discuss it and then go, well, this is what I think. And then you have a dialogue. But it's a real tendency on a part of a lot of people. I don't think it's just young people, but just to immediately come back and tell you, okay, well,
So people need to be open-minded.
I think it's open-minded and recognize that, that by asking good questions and answering questions and all that, you will get much closer to the truth than by just preaching.
True. Or what Jose says, which I like. He says, learn it all, not know it all approach.
That's a great idea. That's a great thing. And I mean, you've got such an opportunity here to find people and reach out to them, whether it's alumni, and, as long as you reach out to them in good faith, and most people will totally connect with you.
I had another question kind of for entrepreneurs or student entrepreneurs trying to help them. What advice do you have for building a team, and kind of when do you think that should happen as your startup develops?
I think that having at least one other person who you can talk to early on is really important if you can, whether it's, two people or three. A solo is really hard for a long time because you're just not, but in terms of building the rest of the team, do you mean? Or
I mean, so you could talk to like a mentor or like people in the hatchery, but yeah, I guess for like building the team, like trying to find co-founders essentially. And I think one perspective I heard was kind of like a trial or like an internship, like people were, and like, I don't know. I think it just varies. Like you could have people asking the equity discussion up front or maybe after they do work. So I don't know.
It's one of the most challenging subjects for student entrepreneurship, and because you don't come with the team automatically, I mean, it's not like you just quit your job at such and such and called three people and said, hey, I got a great idea, let's do this. It's you've got something, you come around, somebody will say that's a cool idea, they'll meet with you once or twice, but they're not really into it and they're not getting anything done, and then you got to figure out. And I think probably the best advice I would give is, if you're going to try people, try it fast. If somebody, don't solve everything, just say, okay, yeah, I know you want to get ownership. I know you want to get equity. Let's take 3 weeks and just see what we can get done. And then we can have that conversation. And if 3 weeks, you should be able to decide, do I want to go another, or 4 weeks? It doesn't have to be 3 years. And then you can have that conversation. But to have that conversation before you even know if you're, I think you can express your willingness to have that conversation. Yeah, I'm willing, of course, to talk about ownership and all of that kind of stuff. But, I'm not quite ready to get married. This is like a first date.
Yeah, you got to date a little bit.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
No,
I mean, let's just hang out a while and see if we're starting to create some stuff together. And if, and frankly, cut your losses if it isn't happening. Because I've seen too many people have teams where there's about 3 or 4 who aren't doing anything. It's funny, there's a company that came through the accelerator 6, 7, 8 years ago, maybe more than that, which is one of our more successful Cal Poly alum companies. It's called Favor, and they started as Naver Favor, and they were an on-campus delivery project, and they ended up morphing into grocery delivery and selling company for a lot of money to a grocery chain in Texas. And they started other companies and all that, but when they came to the accelerator, the idea of like delivering on campus, and hey, you're going out to Taco Bell, and I can say, bring me back this, and this, and you'll get to keep a little bit of it. And that was kind of the general idea. So you can imagine students just loved that idea and wanted to be part of that team. They showed up the first day with like 15 people on the team and accelerator, and we all pulled them aside and said, no, this is not. They ended up with 4 for the summer, and then 2 of them went on, and then another one joined, and so by the time they sold the company, there were 2 of the original 4 that were still involved, which was what it should have been. But that's a case of just way too And the cool thing is they were pretty coachable, and they thought, yeah, this makes sense. They listened to what I said. You can't have 12 people. Just there's not enough for 12 people to do.
Do you know why they felt that they needed 12 people
Because those 12
initially?
people were going to be fun, and they were great, and they loved it, and they could sit around at night and brainstorm forever. What if we did this? What if we did that? Wouldn't it be cool? And have all the wouldn't it be cool conversations. But unfortunately, somebody's got to do it.
And this is related as well, but working with friends versus keeping those two separate. What's your take on that?
I don't think there's any way to keep them separate when you're a college student. They're going to be either start out as your friends or be your friends when they work there. I mean, whatever relationship you have with that person should be one. I mean, friends versus acquaintances. If it's a good friend that you really, really know, then you should be able to be pretty honest with that person and recognize that, yeah, there's a chance it'll mess up a friendship. But there's a chance it won't. And you'll be just great,
and then
successful friends together.
Amazing.
Yeah,
that's great.
Exactly. I mean, so, I don't say don't do it because of that. I mean, probably wouldn't, there's some people I wouldn't join in with, but not because of that.
So how do you find your love of teaching, or how do you get into being
How
a
did
professor? Yeah, from being an entrepreneur to being a professor or being in the education space.
I always liked teaching. I did a lot of visiting lectures, and so I knew I liked organizing the thinking and helping people learn and all of that. And so that was kind of the main thing. And I had taught in an MBA program at Ohio State. I taught entrepreneurship to the executive MBA, so they're a little bit older. So I thought I knew about that. And then, I didn't know anything about Cal Poly. I really didn't, but I knew that it was fun. I liked it. I mean, you have the opportunity to, it makes you think, makes me think, makes one. If you're going to teach, you have to sort of think about what you want people to take away and how you want to communicate that. And had a lot of fun building Business 310 over the years, and trying to figure out how do we make it, something that in 10 weeks will give you enough of a taste of what you have to, of all this kind of stuff. And so it just built over the years. And students, one of the things is that when you see what they're like 10 or 12 years later, it really helps. It really makes you understand.
And just for anyone listening who doesn't really know, Business 310, Intro to Entrepreneurship, that's, it kind of just takes you through the early stage of building a company, would you say? Or
basically, the goal of that is to help you understand, help you find a problem worth solving and a solution worth building. In other words, find something that, what is a customer and how do we find them and how do we understand that? So, but it's pretty much, if you guys have taken it, it's pretty much hands-on, and, you're not expected to build a great company or anything like that. You're expected to fail and figure out why your concept maybe isn't going to work, just as much as why it would. There's nothing worse than lying to yourself about whether your business is going to work or not. So,
and I think you mentioned earlier, we were talking about the different resources within the entrepreneurship community here. You talked about the Innovation Sandbox. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, I know it's a maker space. They have 3D printers we were talking about. Do you know anything else about that?
I know that the mission, which is to enable any student at Cal Poly, regardless of college or major, to be exposed to the kind of technology that only some people get in their classes, which would be 3D printing, circuit boards. I don't know what else they have there now, but it's to be on top of, very early on, there was VR stuff there, and there was, just things to expose students, whether they're an English student or a business student, to that. And so, and it's student run, and anybody can go. I would advise checking out hours or anything online because I can't speak to that, but you can put a link in your program notes.
So on the road to creating a business, would you recommend in today's world to go out and get experience and then build a business, or get an MBA and then try and create a business?
Wait, that's the only two choices? What about just build a business?
Or I guess, yeah, sure, that one too.
I would not recommend going and getting an MBA if you wanted to build a business. I mean, there's reasons to get an MBA, but it's not to go out and start a business. And they have entrepreneurship courses, but you've already had them as an undergrad. There may be a point in your career where an MBA would be valuable to you, but not necessarily to start a business. So getting in industry experience, sure. I mean, if you've got something that, first of all, I will tell you that as a graduate of Cal Poly, you've got a pretty soft landing whichever way you go. So let's say you left here now and you said, look, I've really been thinking this business is pretty cool. I want to give it a year or two and just, I'm going to work on it. If it doesn't work, it's not like, oh no, I will never get a job in my life. It's, you'll be very valuable to people because you've learned more. On the other hand, if you don't have something you want to work on, it's not really advised just to go work on something for the sake of not getting a job. Get a job in an industry that is interesting to you and try to learn what role is interesting there. And then get out when it's time for you to do something different. And is that a year, 2 years, 3 years? If you stay 10, it's probably too long, but maybe not.
Yeah, I feel like I think it's like what you were saying. If you have an idea, go for it. But if not, like, don't try and start something if there's nothing there. Go look for something to start.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at the companies that have been sort of successful coming through Cal Poly in the last few years, and you can even go back further than that to sort of the Jamba Juice era, it's generally been companies that sort of either serve the market that the student knew about or connect. Favor was like that, and then there's others that just are that took something from their learning in school and brought it forward. I'm trying to think, the company that sold the postpartum devices, Impress Technologies, was sort of like, they didn't go out and work in one of those places for years, but they found people who had. So the founder necessarily didn't have that work experience, but she knew enough to find people who did. So, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be, but a lot of it comes from, especially business to business ideas. A lot of them come from people having been in business, like, wow, this was really broken. I'd like to see a way to fix that.
It's been really awesome, like learning about your career and kind of where it went, and the when you started a company around the internet age. I thought that was super interesting, and as well as the behavioral health. That's a space I just feel like I'd never really heard many people talk about. So I thought that was cool. And then we've just been talking about the entrepreneurship ecosystem here at Cal Poly, and it's really is something we all experience it. It's really something quite magical, quite awesome. And where do you like? What do you think could improve it going forward? Is there anything else you'd like to see them do in the future to like add on there? Or you think? I mean, I think it's pretty awesome where it's at now, but I was curious your thoughts.
I think the more that each sort of college starts to identify entrepreneurial pathways for students within that college and supports them alongside the entrepreneurship minor and alongside the entrepreneurship concentration, and that's sort of happening. But it could grow more. It's been exciting to see a course in entrepreneurship come up in journalism. We have a professor in chemistry who is doing a lot in College of Science and Math. I think more of that and continuing to keep the interdisciplinary nature of it. One of the strengths in the minor is there's 58 different majors represented. And you saw this when you took Business 310, which, by the way, there's 5 sections of a quarter. So you have no excuse for not taking it. When you saw that, it's a mixed major crowd. I mean, it's not like being in a class with everybody from your own major. And it's not really like being in necessarily a GE either. It's like being in a class with a bunch of entrepreneurial people. And I would encourage, I think that's something that just everybody should take part in, and it'll help us find those 2,000 who out of 20,000 who are just need this badly.
Totally, yeah. Nicholas, do you have anything else?
That's it. Thank you so much, Doctor, for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Best of luck.